Jeff Gordon is reportedly considering leaving the Fox booth at the end of this year. NASCAR updates the Superspeedway rules package, and Hendrick Motorsports may be finding some additional horsepower somewhere. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. We have a couple of bombshell stories to talk about here today, but first, if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you do not miss any future uploads. Summer is here, so in addition to Out of the Groove episodes covering the hottest rumors and stories from around the NASCAR world, I'm also going to be attending several races coming up, and I'm going to be taking you all on the journey with me. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already so you don't miss any of the exciting content coming up. This episode is also brought to you by Redneck Riviera. Now, before we get to those bombshell stories I was alluding to, Kyle Larson just cannot lose, even random draws. It's just unbelievable at this point. Kyle Larson will start on the pole for the All-Star race this Sunday night at Texas Motor Speedway. It was a random draw. So, I mean, with as good as he's been lately, as well as how good he's been on intermediates this year, I guess it's a good thing there are inverts during the All-Star race, so at least we'll have to see him pass somebody at some point during the night. He's probably not going to just run off and hide, but Tyler Reddick will start on the pole for the All-Star Open race. That was settled based on driver points, so Reddick will start on the pole. He's my pick to win that opening stage. Those RCR cars have been very quick this year, and Tyler Reddick finished second at Texas just last summer. Two other drivers will race their way into the main event, as well as the fan vote winner, so lots to watch for Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening. The All-Star race is this weekend, and it's also the final race that Fox and FS1 will broadcast this year, and that leads nicely into the leading story of the day. Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal reported, actually yesterday, that Jeff Gordon is weighing his future with Fox after this season, and he could leave the booth to take on a larger role with Hendrick Motorsports. He says Gordon is enjoying the three-man booth this year, but also finds the prospect of a big role with HMS as intriguing. And you actually see him in that photo there celebrating with Chase Elliott. That was after his win at Circuit of the Americas just a couple weeks ago. But this is big news. Potential news, I guess. Jeff Gordon has not made a final decision yet. Jeff Gordon is already a minority owner of Hendrick Motorsports. He's still very heavily involved with the team even since he stopped driving, I guess technically after 2016. But he's also been a part of the Fox broadcast booth since he stepped away from full-time driving after 2015. He's been with Fox since 2016. He worked with Mike Joy and Darrell Waltrip for a few years, then Darrell Waltrip retired, and last year it was just Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon. This year they introduced Clint Boyer to make it a trio once again, and now Gordon is considering leaving Fox. If you want my take, I hope he goes. If you've watched my videos for any length of time, you'll know I'm not a big fan of Jeff Gordon's commentary. I'll dive into more detail in a moment, but just first analyzing this from the perspective of the opportunity that Hendrick Motorsports has laid out in front of him. Hendrick Motorsports is a team on the rise. I mean, if not already at or near their peak. And with young drivers like Larson, Elliott, Bowman, and Byron, I mean, Hendrick Motorsports is currently set up to be dominant for 10 or 15 years. If you're Jeff Gordon, a guy who's naturally competitive in nature, someone who's been invested in that organization for decades at this point, why would you not want to take a more hands-on, a larger role at the organization and help build them over the next decade, help them grow even more, help them be more competitive, help them win races? Jeff Gordon's a competitive guy. You can tell, you can even hear it in his voice when he's calling races. When a Hendrick car wins, he's always a little more amped up, he's always excited. Jeff Gordon wants his teams to win, and Hendrick Motorsports, with their current four drivers and with Chad Knaus as the head competition director, they are primed to win a ton of races over the next, again, 10 or 15 years, maybe even more. So just from that perspective, Jeff Gordon positioning himself to sort of inherit Hendrick Motorsports whenever Rick Hendrick eventually chooses to retire. Again, he is 71 years old. That just seems like a glorious opportunity that you really can't pass up on. So before we even factor in the TV stuff, what Hendrick Motorsports has to offer alone by itself should be enough to entice Jeff Gordon to, step into a larger and more involved role over there. So I hope he does it because I want to see Jeff Gordon competing. I want to see him heavily involved. I want to see him hands-on over there at Hendrick Motorsports. I want to see him coaching those drivers. I want to see him working with the teams. I want to see him at the track in a competitive sense, week in, week out for years to come. I think that's great for the sport if one of the sport's greatest drivers ever is still competing for decades to come. But now focusing on the TV thing, like I said, I will not be sad to see Jeff Gordon go. Jeff Gordon's a great driver, but in my opinion, he has not improved as a broadcaster, as an announcer, at all. in the now roughly 5 years he's been doing this. He still isn't smooth. He stumbles over his words very, very frequently. He often oversimplifies things and dumbs things down. Oh, that's just Talladega, baby. Those kinds of quips. He's not funny. Occasionally he'll have a good line here and there, but like this, no, nobody over the age of 12 finds this funny. He doesn't have a good TV voice, in my opinion. He's always kind of had a more high-pitched, kind of nasally sounding voice. That's, like I've said before, that's unfair to him, but that's really my one and only gripe about Adam Alexander calling races, is his voice is just, I mean, hey, I should know about annoying voices. I listen to my own voice for hours and hours each day, and my voice sucks. Back to Gordon, people pointed out his, Hendrick favoritism. I don't see him doing that much these days, but a lot of people still point it out. Maybe I'm just missing it. I tried to give Jeff Gordon a shot. In 2016, he was the look at this guy, and it was clear those first couple of years he was butting heads with Darrell Waltrip. They came from different generations, and that led to them clashing. I think their perspectives didn't often line up. Jeff Gordon often felt like he was awkwardly shoehorned into Mike Joy and Darrell Waltrip's booth. So the first couple of years were rough, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I said, okay, when Darrell Waltrip retires, maybe that will be Jeff Gordon's time to shine. He'll have had a couple of years under his belt, a couple of years of experience. He'll be smoother, he'll be better. And then last year, he handled the Pro Invitational, the iRacing stuff, with the shutdown. He handled that about as well as you could ask, but no, last year's booth with just him and Mike Joy, ooh, that was uninspiring, I would say, to say the least. This year, they brought Clint Bowyer in to insert some energy, some excitement, and I think they've had moments. I think some of the pre-race skits they've done have been really, really funny, have been really enjoyable. But once we actually get into the race itself, Jeff Gordon still just doesn't sound like he belongs. He'll laugh at Clint Bowyer's jokes, but it often sounds like forced laughter. Sometimes he and Mike Joy both fall into the trap of egging Clint Bowyer on too much, almost like they're feeding him lines, and it's just not, no, like let Bowyer be Bowyer if you're gonna do anything. And the delivery more often than not is still not smooth. Occasionally, Jeff Gordon will chime in with some really, unique, interesting perspective from the driver's seat. Both Gordon and Bowyer are usually good at this because they've recently driven these cars. They have relevant and informative things to say about the current Cup Series cars, but those moments are often few and far between. Again, this is all just my opinion. You may like Jeff Gordon in the booth. I do not. So from my perspective, I think it would be best for both Jeff Gordon and for Fox if Jeff Gordon leaves the network and goes and joins Hendrick Motorsports in a more full-time capacity. But now if you're Fox and Jeff Gordon does leave after this year, you better find someone to replace him. Oh, I do not want a Mike Joy, Clint Bowyer exclusive booth. You need a third. You need a second analyst to balance Clint Bowyer's Bowyerisms. My vote would go to Jamie McMurray. He's really good when he's done play-by-play for Xfinity races or truck races, and he already works for Fox. He's on Race Hub every week. I think Jamie McMurray would fit in very nicely alongside Bowyer and Mike Joy, so he'd get my vote. I love Larry McReynolds, but he's already said he doesn't want to go out on the road and be a part of the booth each week anymore. He likes his current role in the Charlotte studios, and it's a good role for him. So unfortunately, Larry McReynolds is not coming back in a big, big way. So let's go with the other Mac, Jamie McMurray. He would get my vote. But again, this is all presuming Jeff Gordon actually does leave Fox. It sounds like he has not made that decision. I've shared my thoughts on it. Let me know down in the comments below if you'd like to see Jeff Gordon stay with TV or leave TV in favor of Hendrick Motorsports. Let me know down in the comments below. More big news from yesterday. NASCAR is changing the Superspeedway rules package. They're further limiting the horsepower, shrinking the tapered spacer even more. They're messing with the spoiler. They're doing a whole bunch of things. Here's the official announcement from NASCAR. They're mandating a smaller tapered spacer at Talladega and Daytona. They're also removing the wicker from the spoiler, and they're adding a reinforced roll bar that was previously optional behind the driver compartment and near the rear wheel well. 3 major changes largely aimed at driver safety. This obviously comes as a reaction to Joey Logano's comments after his flip at Talladega earlier this spring.
I think when are we going to stop? Because this is dangerous doing what we're doing. I got a roll bar in my head. You know what I mean? That's not okay. I'm one hit away from the same situation Ryan Newman just went through.
The added roll bar, of course, is for added security. It's to protect the driver, protect them in their little shell that they're in there. So that's great. Glad to see it. Good to be proactive, I guess. The other 2 changes are going to affect the racing itself, shrinking the tapered spacer even further, limiting the horsepower even more. There are estimates suggesting that now the engines will generate around 450, 460 horsepower as opposed to the 510 they were running earlier this year at Daytona and Talladega. That's going to slow the cars down by an estimated 7 to 10 miles per hour according to NASCAR, which is substantial, and also by removing the wicker bills from the spoilers, so basically shrinking the spoilers down slightly. That's also going to affect the way these cars handle in a pack. No longer will you see those massive rear spoilers punching a huge hole in the air that allows for massive runs and crazy bumps and things like that. You're still going to see some runs get generated, but my guess is that the runs will be less than they've been the last few Superspeedway races. So the lower speeds and the smaller rear spoilers are both primarily aimed at keeping cars on the ground. You know, those spoilers, the bigger the spoiler, the more downforce. When they're facing forward, that plants them in the ground. But the moment car gets spun backwards, as we've seen, if the spoiler's huge, it kind of acts as an opposite effect and helps the car lift off the ground, actually. So by shrinking the spoiler, it makes it a little bit harder for the cars to be lifted off the ground. Obviously, by lowering the speeds, that makes it harder for them to be lifted off the ground. All of this is being done in the name of safety, likely at the expense of the racing product itself. Now, we all have very different ideas of what good superspeedway racing looks like. Some people like the huge runs generated by the most recent rules package. Others liked what we saw, 5, 10, 20 years ago. Others even like the two-car tandem. There's very few of you out there, but I know you guys exist. We've had this discussion before, and it's difficult for any of us, fans watching at home from our couches usually, to really commentate on this. Yes, driver safety is of the utmost importance, but at the same time, the racing needs to be entertaining. NASCAR is an entertaining sport. If fans don't show up to watch or to patronize your racing series, everyone's going to be out of a job eventually. So it's a difficult balance to strike. I understand that we can't have cars flying upside down so easily, the way Logano went flying, earlier this year. But at the same time, these cars are incredibly safe. Logano was perfectly fine after that wreck. I mean, I know we look at Ryan Newman's crash from, a year and a half ago at Daytona, and how terrifying that was, but Newman raced just a couple months later. It could have been a whole lot worse, but he got hit in about the worst possible spot you can get hit on the race car, and he's fine. That's not to downplay the seriousness of either of these incidents, but it's just stating facts. NASCAR stock cars these days are incredibly safe. And while I think we should always look towards taking measures that make the cars even safer, that make the racing even safer, there is that balance. Racing in a straight line with no passes being attempted is safer than pack racing, but it's also not entertaining to watch, which means people eventually will stop tuning into your sport and ratings will go down, money will disappear, and the sport will die. This is obviously an extreme example, but I'm just saying the racing still needs to be entertaining. And I think these changes that were announced yesterday are going to make the racing at superspeedways slightly less eventful than they've been the last, year and a half, 2 years or so. I've loved the superspeedway action from the last 2 years. And as polls suggest and comments on my videos suggest, the vast majority of fans watching have loved the action they've seen as well. So this is a risk NASCAR is taking. I don't think limiting the spoiler a little bit and, reducing the horsepower somewhat is going to affect the racing too much. I still think we'll see pack racing. We'll still see runs generated. It may not be quite as aggressive of runs. We may not see as much passing or jostling for position at the front of the field, but we'll probably still see some. So I don't think it's terrible. I think these measures are within reason, but it's just interesting to see NASCAR kind of go that route. I honestly thought NASCAR was going to sit on their hands and not change anything. Maybe reduce the horsepower a little bit. That's about all I expected, given that, there's only 2 more superspeedway races with this package. It's an all-new car, probably an all-new rules package here in less than a year at Daytona. I figured NASCAR might just let it be, but they took Joey Logano's comments to heart. They made these changes. Let me know how you feel about them down in the comments. I'm okay with them, but I think it's fair to point out where NASCAR's head was at making these. They were thinking all about driver safety and appeasing Joey Logano and the comments he made and the drivers who share those same sentiments, and they weren't thinking quite as much about, how easy is it going to be to pass now? Are we going to see that dreaded air bubble at the front of the field that makes it impossible to pass the leader, like we saw with other superspeedway rules packages in the Gen 6 era? We might, so the product might suffer slightly, but I guess the drivers will maybe be a little bit safer, I guess. They're still hurling around the track at nearly 200 miles an hour in a pack. Crisis around every corner. I don't know, but changes are fine. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. The last thing we're going to cover in this episode, I know we've hit on a wide variety of topics, some big stories this week, but this one has kind of flown under the radar. One of y'all DM'd this to me on Twitter, but on the latest episode of Door Bumper Clear, podcast on Dale Jr.'s Dirty Mo Media Network, Freddie Kraft, TJ Majors, and Brett Griffin, all NASCAR spotters, were talking about Chevrolet and Hendrick Motorsports' recent boost in performance, and Freddie Kraft said this.
The rumor going around is 16 horsepower difference between what the Chevys have versus what everybody else has.
Which is a lot.
That's That's
When you're running
tenths of
500
seconds.
I mean, bear in mind that these guys talking here, I think Freddie Kraft, he's Bubba Wallace's spotter, Toyota. TJ Majors works for Logano, Ford. Brett Griffin, I don't know if he's actually spotting in the Cup Series, but he's been with Ford drivers like Boyer in the past. So these aren't Chevy spotters. These aren't guys working for Chevy or at Hendrick or anything like that. But if that's true, and yes, it does sound like it's just a rumor, but it's going around the garage, that's shocking. I mean, that's not necessarily anything illegal, but if they were able to find within the scope of the rules, or bending the rules perhaps slightly, they're able to find 15, 16 more horsepower than the rest of the field. I mean, that explains why they've been so dominant, and especially like Kyle Larson's dominance at mile and a half this year. He's won 2 of them. He has a few other top 5s. Tracks where you're on the throttle way more than you're off the throttle, that added little bit of horsepower can make a huge, huge difference. That's pretty big. I don't know what else to make of it because obviously we don't even know if it's true. Chad Knaus is now lead competition director over at Hendrick Motorsports, and he got a lot out of that 48 car for years and years and years. I'm sure he could be adding some of his magic touch to those Hendrick cars this season. Either way, this is something to keep an eye on and something that I didn't see a whole lot of people talking about yesterday, but I don't know, keep an eye on Hendrick Motorsports. That's crazy. Can the other teams and manufacturers catch up? That's the real question. Anyway, that's all we've got to talk about on Out of the Groove here today. Thank you all for watching. Again, be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR day in, day out, rumors, predictions, news, all that and much, much more. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. I could not do this show without your incredible support. Plenty more to talk about this week. I've gotten a lot of questions. Eric, are you going to be at Texas for the All-Star race? Currently, no. The plan is no, unfortunately. I have a lot of traveling coming up, so I'm sort of planning and getting settled down for that. I won't be at Texas for the All-Star race, but I will be watching it from home. I'm sure it'll be something. If you're going to be there in person, I hope you have a great, great time. Thanks for watching this episode, y'all. I'll see you again very, very soon.